And now, on Lavecon 2020, we bring you Lave Radio Veterans Edition.
Hey, so
Hello.
Simon said I should bring a skull. Apparently, the last time we did this, I did a really long monologue. So he thought I should do Hamlet. Welcome to the Lavecon Veterans Podcast.
Woo!
This is the original Lave Radio team, minus our usual fourth wheel, Fozza, who unfortunately couldn't be with us this weekend. So I'm afraid you're stuck with John, you're stuck with me, you're stuck with Chris. Hi, John.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, pretty good. You know, few hours, but I feel like I've missed you.
I love the fact that because I thought, well, I'll join the call like 2 minutes before. I got other stuff to do, and I've got missed messages on my phone from Grant wondering if I'm not going to show up. He's so panicky, but that's the professional in him. He expects better.
Yeah. I was just saying before we went live. You're efficient. That's what you're.
I've never been described as efficient before.
My father was always a 10 minutes early man, and he used to hate it that I was on time. So
well, I'm always really early for job interviews, like quarter of an hour early, and it annoys people if you're really early.
If they're paying for your time, it's obviously. Hey, Chris, good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's lovely to see you all, and it's lovely to. I was just searching down under my shelves because I knew one of my little ornaments had fallen off. I've got my badge from last year's Lavecon, so I shall definitely be wearing that for this call.
To be fair, I did sort of think about I should wear something Lavecon. I should go and find, and I just thought I have so much Lavecon stuff. There's this hat, there's this shirt, there's this this mug, this stuff, this. And in the end, it was just, I've got to sort this out. I've got to sort this out. I've got to sort that. And all the merchandise ends up still in the boxes where they are. But
are you sure? I mean, she's not necessarily on this part of the stream, but it looks to me like Karen is wearing all of the merchandise. Are you just storing it on Karen?
yeah. Essentially, that's our.
That's the biggest gin and tonic I've seen for a while.
That's our deal. I'm upstairs and obviously in a merchandise-free zone, and Karen is downstairs and basically got it all to hand, complete with crochet. So clearly that's a feature, not a bug. But yeah. So no, we're good. We're basically we're distancing, not because we're being socially distant. We're distancing for Zoom echo purposes. So she's downstairs and I'm upstairs, and I'm having to jockey my devices a little bit because as some people know, I've been processing video for most of today. So the author readings has literally just finished processing and just gone over to Grant for this evening. So
did it crash as I predicted?
No, it didn't. No, it was fine. It did take. I mean, when I set it to render overnight, and so it had 100,000 frames to render. It did that, and then at 7 this morning, I set it exporting, and it finished at about 2:30. So it gives you a sense of how much crunching I had to do. So I just left the laptop to it. But yeah, it was quite nearly an hour and a half of author readings with. And the problem is, I'm doing it again. I'm monologuing here. But the
It's fine, Alan. We got an hour to fill. Just
Yeah, you like the Incredibles villain. How did you do it? You got me monologuing.
I'm such a perfectionist in that when I'm doing readings and stuff that basically I put loads of little dissolves into things. So of course it's got all these blinking dissolve transitions in it, and of course that just takes up eats all the processing. So so I had to render it all out, which me being me. Anyway, hello to our audience. Hello to everybody. I am so sorry that we are basically just chewing the fat and not really talking much about anything in particular. But that is basically what we do. When we started this podcast, I think we said that the first couple of shows were essentially 6 hours of us just sitting and laughing. And I don't think it's really changed that much in terms of what happens when you get us together in a room. And that's lovely, and it's something that that you miss over a period of time. We could probably do with discussing a little bit about Elite Dangerous. We might want to discuss a bit about the game, a little bit about what people are up to. But I think we should kind of do a bit of a catch up, really, and just go around and sort of talk about things that we've been doing, that we've been up to in our lives. Because actually they still do that on the show, so people might actually be interested in some of that. I promise I will try and keep mine short now that I have talked enough about video processing. John, what have you been doing? What have you been up to?
Well, this was always going to be awkward, wasn't it? Because although we're still managing to have a Lavecon of sorts because of COVID-19, unfortunately COVID-19 has really impacted my life because I work for the NHS. So that's what's been keeping me busy. I haven't had a lot of time to do other things. I mean, I've been doing some coding projects and things like that. I might talk about that if we run out of things to talk about. But I don't want to bore everyone with the details. But it's just been it's been a horrible situation, not just necessarily because of the nature of a pandemic, and obviously a lot of people have suffered. But also it's killed conversation. Everywhere you go, it's replaced weather as a British pastime. You walk in anywhere and, that's what everyone's talking about. We couldn't avoid it last night on the Zoom call, but at the end of the day, if it's therapy and, people need to talk about it because it's impacted them, I think it's a good thing to do. So sorry to start on a downer there, but.
No, not at all. I think so. And I think the thing is that with this kind of situation that we're in, I did talk a little bit last night about this. It means that essentially that we don't see each other, we don't catch up. And Lavecon has always been, John Lunn was saying about this earlier, it's always been a kind of touchstone. It's one of those things, if it's your constant in your year, then you can go back there and kind of go, well, what's changed? And you can kind of talk to people and they'll catch you up on what's changed for them. And you can talk about what's changed for you. And it gives you a kind of a barometer. And I guess the thing here is that it's not just about what's changed, as in what have you done in your life. It's also about, well, how are you doing? And I think that's really important. We need to have space and have time to be able to ask that. It certainly, I'm sure it's completely changed the way in which your day-to-day work is in terms of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. For people interested, I handle the data for all of the patients in Wales. So of course, whenever somebody needs to send a letter out to all of the vulnerable people, they need to speak to our database and they need to query it and check all the data. So that's some of the stuff I've been doing.
Chris, what have you been up to? How's things with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, COVID-19 has basically just cancelled my, pretty much my year. I was obviously, I'd got in the last couple of years quite into working with a couple of different board game distributors, going around to conventions, throughout the year. I mean, you saw the Asmodee guys at Lavecon last year. that's the sort of thing I do. Probably, probably on average a couple of times a month. Throughout the year, I'd be somewhere demonstrating something, and of course that the entire calendar for board gaming and expos and conventions is just it's gone. I've also had, because of the situation with the schools closing, I would say a lot of my lockdown has just been, just parenting my daughter. Really, that's been a huge amount of it. I did, right at the beginning, I did get into reading an audiobook because I thought, well, people are stuck at home. I'm not going to produce something that's for sale. Honestly, I know this is really bad. I'm a bit too lazy to organise something for charity, so I just thought, I'm just going to read this book. It's a public domain book. I thought I'll just read it. People can listen to it. People can enjoy it. I slightly miscalculated because I had it in my head. The book was The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which is, for those of you who don't know, the Sherlock Holmes writer. Also produced a number of science fiction novels. I actually thought that because I used to have a paperback which was The Lost World and Other Stories, so I had it in my head that The Lost World was a novella. And about 3 hours into it, and there were still no dinosaurs, I was like, because I was reading it on my Kindle. It's not like a paperback. You can see how far you're going. I was just reading it. It's like, we don't seem to be getting very far. So I did a quick word count on the document, and it was like 75,000 words. I'm like, oh no, this isn't a novella. I'm just producing an audiobook here at this point in my evenings, just for the love. So that was fun, and it was good. It was weirdly kind of timely because, in a funny sort of way, because I got to a couple of chapters. It's been a long time since I read it. I read it when I was in my late teens, and of course it struck me when I started reading it how difficult some of the kind of racial language in it was. And then a few weeks later, obviously the whole George Floyd thing happened. So it was timely to read a book written by somebody who's not even, I would say he's not even racist. I mean, he's racist by today's standards, but if you look at his writing, he doesn't dislike non-Europeans. He just thinks they're inferior. Like he thinks they've got their place in the world, and he's got his place in the world. And it goes to show just how these views can be held by people who they're not even particularly hateful people. They're just ignorant, and they live in their own little world, and don't know any different. So I did put out a disclaimer on the beginning of one of the episodes, just saying, this is how people talked back then. And to be fair, the book is written from the first person perspective of one of the characters, so it makes sense that the narrative would reflect his views. But it's still, I still love it as a book. It is the original, I think, the kind of original dinosaur adventure book. I don't know if I'm wrong about that, but it's it's a fascinating historical take on what they knew about paleontology at the time. But also, just an interesting slice of life. I've commented on one of the things that there's a section in the book where they talk about how they would get rescued, or how they would revisit this strange part of the world where the dinosaurs. And it suddenly struck me that aeroplanes were a rarity. I mean, there's a comment in the book where he says, if someone ever perfects the single propeller aircraft, we might be able to come back here much more easily. And it's like, wow, that's because in a sense it feels quite modern. But sorry, I've just got into one about the Lost World there. But yeah.
If you're monologuing, I'm not monologuing, right?
That's pretty good. But if anybody cares, that's a completely free audiobook. I can't think of the links off the top of my head, but if you go to the Radio Theatre Workshop on Facebook, it's linked.
Yeah, it's linked on the BSFA website because we did a whole sort of gathering of stuff at the start of the lockdown, and we've updated that since then. Thank you. So there's a bunch of links up there that we can show people if we need in terms of stuff. For me, I'm in a room that I couldn't get in 3 months ago. This is my office that was full of miniatures and just wall to wall stuff. I have I think I said a little bit last night with a few people on the chat that came in last night. I have basically put up shelves. I have I've lost a lot of weight. I've clearly lost a lot of hair. I've done a bit of writing. We've continued to work. I mean, the thing is with universities is that, we were at the back end of the term, and so it was a little bit fortunate. I only had a couple of things to sort out, but we were a little bit fortunate. But we still have the students working, so we're still marking the work, we're still going through the work. One of my colleagues decided to go on maternity leave, so I ended up covering for her. So I've actually been busier than
self.
Yeah, clearly, couldn't hold off. So I'm covering for her. I'm covering for her till January. So, since March, everything, as everybody else has been socially distanced. And actually, Chris, we basically saw each other. That was the last occasion that that I was really able to do anything very social. In that, you were interviewed by some of my students. It was one of the last things that we were able to do. And then, of course, we kind of locked everything down. And now I'm doing lectures every week. So I do lectures, and all my podcast skills I utilized in recording my lectures via audio. So I'm recording sort of long lectures. So I get my monologues out doing that in terms of stuff. But yeah, so we've, Karen and I have been embarking on a kind of an upgrade to the house in terms of the stuff that we're doing. We've put together things for Lavecon. We've sort of started to we've done a lot of crafting projects. She's done quite a lot in, her crochet. I've been making stuff, which is why we have the Fire Demon workshop later on, which people can kind of see how I make fire demons out of tissue paper. And yeah, so, and I'm even so, the daytime TV show at about 5 o'clock called Money for Nothing, where they get stuff out of skips and they then make something new out of it. So we had an old desk out in the conservatory, and so I decided I'm going to turn it into a wooden filing cabinet, and I'm kind of halfway through. So some of the bits, here's the top, and here's the bit of the old desk. It's the bit of the old desk.
Yeah.
It's going to be. It was a 2-drawer and a 2-drawer and a big desk. It's now going to be a 4-drawer filing cabinet. So the drawers, I've just hacked the bottom off, and blah 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 blah. So it's the things that you do, and I've certainly not been quiet. We're also writing more. There's stuff to do for Jupiter Skies. There's stuff to do for the sequel to the novel that I'm going to talk about tonight, or that I'm reading from tonight. So yeah, it's been really busy, but it has also been really hard because, like everybody, you're just not seeing people. And that's pretty tough. So I got to see, for the first time in sort of 4-5 months, I got to see my mum last weekend, which was lovely, and so we spent the day down there last Saturday, and for the first time in like forever. And I'm probably going to go down in the week this week because she needs her internet upgraded. So I'm going to go and upgrade her router. We bought her a Facebook portal just before this all started, and it's been absolutely invaluable because we've been able to actually see each other, and she's not that technologically minded, but no, it was great to be able to see her and stuff. So yeah, so that's most of the things that have been going on here. But I have got back into my games. I am sitting here at the moment. I've got my office games machine. I have the one in the attic, which is just above me, which I've not yet got back to. So that still needs to be uncovered and rebuilt and everything else. But the second games machine is here, and I've actually just started to replay computer games in the last week or two, and I'm kind of catching up on games that I stopped playing in 2014, in 2015, because I really didn't have time, and so now I'm starting to get some time, which is really nice over this summer. So I'm hoping that will continue.
Yeah, one of in terms of gaming things, I've been sort of looking gradually through. I don't know if anyone saw on Itch.io, they had they call it the bundle for racial justice and equality. I've just been on there to check the URL. I've seen that it's like a humble bundle, but obviously it's
Yeah,
raising.
I got it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm saying for the benefit of the audience. So it's a thing where your minimum donation is $5, but you can obviously donate a lot more. There are now 1,741 games in that bundle.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, if you played one of the games that's in there every day, it's going to take you like 4 years to play all of them. So I've been going through and cherry picking, some of the things that look really interesting. And there's some really nice games in there. There's a really fascinating one, which obviously stood out to me because it's turn-based tactics, and that's in terms of video gaming, that's my thing. And it's called Overland, and it's this really. Have you seen it?
No.
Okay. No. It's really
I
interesting.
thought you were going to say a different one, which I'll mention in a minute. But you go on.
No, there's a few in there that are great, but I mean, Overland is a sort of. You look at it and you think, oh, that looks a little bit XCOM-y, but it's not really. It's this game where it's a bit like a zombie survival game, but they're not zombies. They're some sort of weird mutants. And each little scene is a little square, like a tableau. And every time you move, the monsters move. And you have to, it's basically like, it's kind of a bit like The Road. You've got this car, and every time you stop, you have to like find fuel and medicine and just try and keep going. And it's a really fascinating little game. No instructions to it, so you've got to just learn the rules as you go. But we were talking about Walking Dead earlier. There's this really interesting concept where you're sort of driving along this deserted highway from the east coast of America to the west, and every now and again you'll pass people who've got like their car open and they want to trade items with you, and you pick up more survivors along the way. Sometimes you have to abandon people. It's a really interesting, heartfelt little game. So yeah, love that. If you haven't checked it out, just do a search on Google for Itch.io Black Lives Matter, and it will come up with the bundle. And it's just this isn't, well, as far as I know, this isn't like big studios. Most of these are games by like one-man bandit kind of game designers, and it's really amazing to see just so many people supporting it.
There are a few extras in there. I mean, Fire Rescue is in there, which is a turn-based scenario game, which went to Fig, and it was actually it was the Fig project. It was the Fig project that was being promoted just after Phoenix Point, which is why I remembered it. And turn-based, fire rescue game with fire rescue scenarios, which looked really good and had really, really interesting ideas. And yeah, there's a load of others. There's quite a few that are resource-based. So I think I put it to you, didn't I, John? I tipped you off about it, but I think you'd already found it. Has he disappeared?
He's muted.
Did he go to sleep? What did he do?
Sorry, I muted myself, so I wasn't breathing or anything. I'd seen it already because a lot of people were talking about it because it was it's a really good deal if you just paying the $5 or $10 minimum, and it wasn't just games. They'd thrown in some assets for game developers and stuff, and even if you're not going to use those assets directly, you can hack them apart and make other stuff with them. So I thought it's worth the money. It's a good cause, and I might get around to playing one of the games one day, or give them all to my son. He loves.
Yeah, I thought there's quite a lot in there that that you could use, and such a variety of different things. But just picking up on the chat that the bundle offer ended on the 18th of June. So I'm afraid we're in now an exclusive club in that we picked it up. But lovely. I mean, for me, even just seeing the itch.io how it works, in terms of the site, because you've been recommended to me by somebody else, and I'd not really been on there and not seen the stuff. Just seeing how it worked was great, So
I think I've bought print and play board games off there before as well. Just like bought the PDFs.
There was quite a lot of role-playing game supplement content in there, so it was a good few things that that people could make use of, and certainly if you're working on your own things, then there's all sorts of stuff to inspire you in terms of what was there.
You might appreciate the fantasy hex map editor that I found in there. There's a thing called Hex Kit I was playing around with. It's quite cool.
I'm a bit spoiled there in that I've had campaign cartographer for many years. So essentially campaign cartographer spoils me rotten in terms of being able to do stuff with for RPG mapping and what have you. But anyway, we should probably stop on the divergent way in which we're going. If we were worrying about covering an hour, we've done 25 minutes about this.
I worry every year, but I shouldn't really, because we always manage it.
We just sit and have a chat. That's what happens. So elite things. Okay, so stuff that's interesting in terms of Elite Dangerous and in terms of the community that are here. Things that we've had go on. So Karen has probably talked a little bit about the fact that she's been talking with Frontier over the last few weeks. She has managed to obtain lots and lots of ship skins. So it's quite surprising to me, and this was interesting because obviously over the period that we've done Lavecon, Frontier have been really generous in providing those ship skins to us. The Lavian flaming look ship skins, and of course it's happened over a long period of time. So now there's quite a lot of them, and people have missed a lot of the different years. So she basically went back and asked them about quite a lot of the different ship skins, mostly so that she'd have things to go in the raffle and for other content. And so we've managed to sort of get all these things, and it just shocked me at how many they've produced for in this theme for Lavecon. It's pretty amazing. So if you're missing a ship skin, ask Karen. Or is she over there? Somewhere there'll be a window.
You make a terrible YouTuber. You don't know which direction to point.
Was it Pachow you're supposed to do, isn't it, or something?
Yeah. Link up here.
Yeah. That's tabletop minions or whatever. I think there's in terms of. But yeah, so it's just interesting to see how well it's been supported over such a period of time. And obviously, I guess you guys both watched the Odyssey video and have seen the update in terms of what's there.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
Go on, you go first, Chris.
Okay. I mean, obviously it's really interesting. I think, that whole, obviously there's the whole space legs thing. Being able to get out of the ship and walk around is something that a lot of us have been waiting for a long time. And I think regardless of what shape that takes, it's going to be really interesting to just see it and experience it. Same way, first time we got down on surface of planets, with SRVs, that was a fascinating experience in itself. I still, being quite honest, cards on the table, I still personally struggle in terms of long-term gameplay to kind of get my head in really the sort of the multiplayer leaning that the game is now even more. But it's still one of the most beautiful games around, and it's still, it's been such a long time, honestly, since I've played it, that I'm actually really looking forward to going back in, because I think it's going to be a very different game than the last time I saw it. So at some point, when I've got, I say time, because obviously in a sense all we've got at the moment is time, but I mean uninterrupted child-free time to sort of get into a game for several hours. I'm going to be fascinated to take a look at where it currently is, because I haven't seen the incremental changes over the last year. It'll be a big surprise.
So you're kind of getting into my boat in that regard, in that every time I go in now, it's ooh, look at all these things that because it's like visiting a town that's basically that's building a new office block or a new everything else because I just don't I've not followed and not kept up to date in terms of the detail. John, what were your thoughts?
Well, I thought it looked good. I was, I'm slightly conflicted. I'm not angry or anything, but like the kind of development, what do you call it? The path they've taken, like ships carriers. I don't play with a lot of people, and even if I did, I don't, I don't go online enough to do something, great as a community. So I wasn't interested in the ship's carriers stuff, but this, could be interesting for me. The first thing I was looking at was, what is the atmosphere like? What is the planet like? I suppose in one, I was a little bit disappointed because it was just a rocky planet, and I'm thinking, oh well, I'd rather have planets with stuff on to look at apart from rocks. What's the point of getting out of your ship if you're just walking around? Because you can already go out in a buggy. So I wasn't quite sure. So I guess I'm waiting for more details on what's actually going to be involved. I was originally sold on the idea during the original Kickstarter that we would eventually be able to get out of our ships. But people have interpreted that different ways. Some people are talking about how they can walk around their own ship, which is interesting. We've played some of those other games where you work as a team on a ship. Pulsar, that was it. So that could be an interest if they do something like that. That's interesting. For some reason, when I thought about getting up in first-person mode, it wasn't like this shoot 'em up idea necessarily, like a kind of Star Citizen thing. It was maybe get up from your ship and walk around a space station and build social features into space stations, meet up with your buddies. But that's hard to do, well for a games development company, because you've got to make people want to get off their ship and use it and see this content and use this content. But at the same time, you don't want to be forcing people to do it, because some people are going to say, well, I don't want to, I just want to fly my ship. And you can't lock missions behind a guy that you got to go off your ship and go see on the station, because then people will be a bit miffed that they've got to do that. So how are they going to pull it off? How are they going to make it relevant? If they do something like that, I don't know. So that was my take on it. But I do think the game needs to evolve at least more than what it was when, with Frontier and First Encounters. I think in some respects it already has evolved further than that, but in some respects it hasn't met my criteria either, in that I haven't landed anywhere and seen a clock tower or a big dome. Well, yeah, you do see some big domes, but you know what I mean? There's no lush green grass or trees anywhere, which I kind of, although it was very crude on a 16-bit Amiga, my imagination filled in the rest. And so, yeah, I think that's what I'd like to see.
I mean, I should pimp. If people are desperate for space legs, then obviously Pulsar Lost Colony is available on Steam for £11.69. If that's
that's worth it. Yeah,
I absolutely love when we had some of those games with Pulsar. It's just great fun in terms of going, a late night with three of your friends, just wasting your time beaming down to planets, and then somebody clearing off with the ship and leaving you there.
Well, this came up during lockdown, because one of the things that has kept me sane in lockdown was the fact that thankfully a new Animal Crossing game was released literally the first weekend of lockdown, which has been, goodness knows what this year would have been like for me without Animal Crossing. But I was playing with Fozza. I mean, Fozza's not here, so I'm not going to talk him down too much, but Fozza came and visited my island, and he wanted to interact with something, and he couldn't, because you have like these different settings with friends, and it's only people that you make like best friends that have sort of editorial control over your icon. So Fozza's like, are you going to make me best friend? I'm like, no. He's like, why not? I'm like, I don't trust you. And he's like, oh man, that's harsh. Why is that? I said, do you remember GTA 5? He's like, oh yeah. I said, do you remember Pulsar? Oh yeah. I said, yeah, those are all the reasons you're not going to be a best friend on my island. He's like, what did I do in Pulsar? I'm pretty sure the first thing you did was went down to the engine room and turned all the coolant for the reactor off. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Odyssey and going back to the update for Odyssey, I give a little bit of a take here. I think actually, in terms of development, it's worth at least considering that Frontier have made a bit of a rod for their own back in some respects, because one of the things that Elite Dangerous has kind of tried to use as a USP is its hard science fiction, sort of bent. Its theme of hard science fiction with generated gravity, with all of those other things. And actually, we talked a little bit about this early on in the development cycle when they started to say about, oh, you're going to be able to land on planets, you're going to be able to do this, you're going to be able to explore around your ship. And we saw some of Josh Attack's original concept art of the interiors and stuff. And I was kind of sitting there and going, okay, so you're going to do FPS, kind of FPS, or not necessarily shooter, but FP, movement around the ship in zero gravity. That's a bit different. How are you going to do that then? And of course, when you think that all of the control movement of that kind of process is reliant on somebody essentially having one axis, which is I am on the ground, pretty much fixed. Sure, okay, people jump and they leap and they do other bits and pieces, but the majority of that axis is fixed. That's actually quite hard to manage in terms of what you're trying to do. And then if you're going to be accurate on all these other planets, that's variations of gravity. So you're not just talking about, Earth-style gravity. You've got to kind of think about, is it 0.5? Is it 0.2? Is it, and I guess that's a bit easier when you've got, a little bit of gravity to work with. But it does mean you've got to do an awful lot of thinking around a lot of different types of. So I think they've essentially gone a similar way, or at least it looks. And I'm being a little cynical here. I'll kind of give them a bit more carrot in a moment. But it looks a little bit like they've locked it down into a particular. Well, you can do it here, and by doing that, we can control the space. And so by controlling the space, it means that the experience is only this type of experience, which is kind of similar to how the SRVs work, and and the fact that it's not built up areas and so on and so forth. So it doesn't disturb the kind of general populace idea. Now, one thought here, and I'll broach this carefully, okay? And this is meant in the most humorous sense, not in a serious sense at all. Okay?
Yeah.
Given that we are in a socially distant environment, which is causing us all to effectively to operate in these small spaces, is there an analogy in relation to the commander continually operating in this small spaceship and never going into a bar, never going into a city, never going into a public space? Maybe they need to think about their fiction and invent some kind of contagious disease
Space
that means
mumps.
that nobody that means that nobody can congregate, which that would allow them to to kind of sell this idea that you're never going to go into crowds and you're never going to see all these massive populations in these cities because they all sit at home on Zoom.
Well, that would be interesting, but I wonder in the future, you'd still have people wanting to meet up. You'd have to create a virus where the effects was so horrific, like 30 seconds after you got it, you had explosive diarrhea and then death or something. People eventually will just get desensitized to it, like they already have. We've seen in the real world, and they're just like, "Oh, it'll be fine." So yeah, that would be quite interesting. How much of a nasty disease would you have to make it to make that actually believable?
And I'm being very, very facetious here, and I recognise I'm being very facetious here. It does, in all seriousness, it does kind of lend itself to a small thing that that has been an interesting observation for me, because of course, and I've said this a couple of times, I spent the last 3 years writing a computer game where the world is attacked by a virus that turns everyone into crab people, and basically that then you fight by joining one of these factions and kind of try and take down the Hive Queen. So I spent 3 years working on Phoenix Point, researching an awful lot of articles on virus behavior, on people's individual circumstances on when they get infected and how that manages and so on. And honestly, just like pretty much every science fiction writer, when it actually happens, seeing how societies react, seeing how it all works, seeing how whether the plans are good or whether the plans are bad, seeing how the plans work and how they affect individuals in terms of their lives, we have no idea. We had no preparation. There's so many things that you realize are kind of day-to-day things that people have to do that you never thought about, in terms of when you're trying to describe a fiction where that kind of thing might happen. So yeah, it's kind of, it's interesting in terms of all of these things. But yeah, I in all seriousness, I don't think Frontier can use that as an excuse, and they're probably best, steering well clear, to be perfectly honest. But no, I'm quite excited for what I've seen. I think it does look cool. One of the most exciting things for me, and I'm a bit sad here, because two of the games that were formative for me over a period of time when I was young were Elite, and then later Carrier Command. And when I played, even though the remake of Carrier Command, the Gaia Missions remake of Carrier Command, there are things about it that aren't great. But when I got to play it, and I got to get out of the carrier and walk around with a machine gun, and then get in a jeep, and then go and do other things and operate a robot and so on. It just blew my mind, because I was thinking about the straitjacket, the kind of the imagined thing that I had when I was a kid, when I played the game, and suddenly I had the same story, but this expanded set of abilities, this expanded set of functions. And I think, certainly for me, Elite has always kind of, when it starts to fulfill that, when it starts to give me that expansion, when Elite Dangerous gives me the extra that I didn't have, which kind of chimes in with what you said about Frontier, John. When it gives me the extra that I didn't have, then I start to be amazed, and then it starts to hook the imaginative part of my mind again, in terms of what's there. That's the stuff I love, in terms of what happens. Oh, did I kill the conversation?
No. Taking it all in.
Was that too much skull? Was that too much skull? Was it me and Yorick over here?
Yeah.
So no, I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I'll certainly be playing it at some point. I have to confess, and I said this last night, so apologies to those that were there last night. I'm still flying my Cobra. I haven't upgraded from my original ship, so at some point when I get that computer all sorted out in the attic again, I've got to do something about that. But hopefully won't be long now, because these rooms are getting sorted, so we're getting back to putting life back together in terms of things. So other things that we can kind of talk about relating to stuff that's here. I think, it's a shame we've not seen Foz this weekend, and it's such a shame, because he's such an asset to everything that we do. I really miss him, but he is actually playing. Of the four of us, he's the one playing the game at the moment. He's doing a bit of mining, so and catching up and redoing all of that sort of stuff. So he's kind of missed in terms of content too, in terms of what's there. But otherwise, I think, I've started to get back into playing some of my older computer games. And I think I'm going to try and get through, apart from my itch 1500, 1700 list, I'm going to try and get through some of the games that I bought over a period of time, and and kind of didn't get a chance to play, but I liked them, and I kind of then didn't get through. And I think that's that's going to be a great thing. You've been doing a lot with Tabletop Simulator, haven't you, Chris?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been interesting. It's funny, because when lockdown sort of started, people were sort of suggesting to me about playing board games online, and I was very slow to come to it, because in terms of, I suppose, because for me, like, board gaming is one of the times when I see my friends. So it kind of seemed like a bit of a kick in the teeth for suddenly board gaming to become another thing that I'd sit at the computer to do. But actually, after a few weeks, I did get into it, and to me, it's not the same as board gaming. It's not the same as getting together with people, but it is definitely better than not doing it at all. I've had experiences of a couple of different things. One of which is, Tabletop Simulator on Steam, which is, for those of you who don't know it, it's basically a 3D environment where you just have the components from the board game as objects. So it doesn't run anything for you unless the person scripted it. You have to know how to play the game in order to do it. It's not a digital adaptation. And the other one is Board Game Arena, which is definitely something that I recommend if you have more casual friends that want to get together for a board game, because this provides the board games for you as a web page, and it's all scripted and the game runs. The downside of it is the choice of games is a lot lower. But it is much more straightforward for a more casual audience. So for those of you interested, I am actually running some board games this weekend. There's a sign-up sheet. If you go to tinyurl.com/Lavecon 2020BG, I've got some slots to sign up for some games with me. There's a couple today that use Tabletop Simulator. So if you have Tabletop Simulator and you want to try a couple of games, do come along and see that. In fact, definitely come along and sign up for this evening's game of Betrayal at House on the Hill, partly because it's an excellent game, and partly because at the moment I only have one sign up for that, and you can't play it 2-player. So I need more people. I need more people for Betrayal. For those,
are you the murderer, or am I the murderer, or are you the murderer?
Just a moment. So I'll try and sell it. I'll try and sell it a little bit. Betrayal at House on the Hill is a classic of board gaming. You basically, it's kind of, if you imagine like Scooby-Doo become as a board game, and they have actually done a Scooby-Doo edition of Betrayal House on the Hill, which I really have to look into. But you start off, you're all exploring this creepy house and picking up items and looking for clues. But then at a certain point in the game, a thing called the Haunt begins, which actually introduces what you have to do to win the game. But what's fascinating about that is that it's one of your own players that triggers it, and then another one of your other players might actually end up becoming the bad guy. So the rest of you are now fighting against one of your team, and you have opposing objectives. It's an excellent game. Galmidden is saying, am I repeating myself for anyone else? I don't know if that's technical repeating or if it's just that I do repeat myself. The other game that I'm running it's after this. It's around about 5 o'clock-ish, I think. I can't totally remember. But I've got sign-ups for Burgle Brothers, which is a cooperative 4-player bank heist game. It's very cool. Got that kind of like Ocean's 11 type 1960s art style. It's basically, for anyone who's ever watched my Twitch streams of the game Invisible Ink, it's Invisible Ink as a board game. It's, you're moving around, you're trying to avoid guards, you're trying to open safes and get items. It's a good time. For those of you who might want to play a game that don't have Tabletop Simulator, or, I'm sure talking to this crowd, you've all got PCs capable of running it. But if, for any reason Tabletop Simulator is not for you, I am running tomorrow lunchtime a game of Stone Age on Board Game Arena, which is a great kind of Sunday lunchtime game. It's a classic worker placement game. Basically building a little Neolithic village. It's cool. It's good. So those are the things I'm doing. So yeah, head to that, tinyurl.com/Lavecon 2020BG. It is first come, first served, but I will get in contact with the people that will fill in with that. And yeah, as someone I think's pointed out in chat, I believe Tabletop Simulator is 50% off everything at the moment. So the base game is $7.49. And quite a lot of the DLC, which I won't be using for the games today. The games I'm going to be using are both mods. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of things on there. I have actually, if we had more time, I've picked up Scythe, and I've picked up, what's the other one I picked up? Oh, something else. Oh, The Captain is Dead, which is great. But we don't have time for those this weekend. They're slightly longer.
It's worth pointing out, I think, with Tabletop Simulator, that actually the majority of stuff that you end up playing is the stuff in the workshop.
Yeah.
You don't tend to get the official products.
No.
Because loads of people have created versions of different games in the workshop. And we tried Firefly and I love Firefly as a game. Trying it over Tabletop Simulator, it was fine for me.
Ooh.
If you've got one person, because the version that this person in the workshop had made was so photorealistically good, the bandwidth requirement for that for one of the individuals was just too much for his internet.
Okay.
All kind of died out. So we restarted and we said, okay, let's try something a bit simpler. So we picked up the 1984 edition of Axis and Allies, which is of, you know, and I have a more modern edition here, but you know, obviously you can, you know, 4 of us could jump straight into that. But then, of course, your problem is, and you have to make sure of this, is if you go for a nostalgic favorite that you used to play with all your schoolmates, if you've got one friend who wasn't one of your schoolmates and has never played the game before, and after about half an hour goes, look, I didn't choose to play Japan, and basically I'm being kicked. You know, why? You know, this isn't fun. None of this is fun. You know, so yeah, you do have to kind of think carefully, and obviously quite a lot of the mechanics of 80s board games are quite punishing. You know, they didn't necessarily think about the whole experience. They were all about the win and the loss, you know, in terms of what's there. So, yeah, you know, I mean, I do think Tabletop Simulator is a great tool. It's one of those ones that you look at and you kind of start thinking about what you can do. And, wow, I can make this and I can make, and then I go, oh no, I could lose my life in here, you know, because, you know, as a kid, I used to sit, and this was said last night, actually. I think some of the people on the chat said this last night. I used to sit and make board games out of cardboard as a kid. You know, I used to go and, you know, get empty boxes and draw hex squares on them and straight squares on them and kind of make all the, you know, different stuff. And of course, Tabletop Simulator is that, but it's better and it looks good, you know. And so you've got this kind of sandbox to kind of make something, and you're like, oh man, I could make. Yeah, that could be my whole life.
And I can see it being amazing for like collaborative prototyping, because instead of just sitting and making this prototype on your own, actually suddenly you could get a few people around the table with you and just spawn components and just say, like, what happens if we try it like this?
I thought about doing Jupiter Skies like that, you know, using Tabletop Simulator and making some of the sets, and I mean, I've made locations in Roll20, so essentially I've got I've got 2D graphics, top-down kind of roguelike graphics that you can just drop into Roll20. And I know, you know, from friends who are RPGing, they're basically, that's what they're doing with lots of set resources. But I made my own using Campaign Cartographer.
Cool.
My own. And, having those locations, it just adds, you know. And then I was looking at once I'd done a little bit of that, I was looking at Tabletop Simulator and going, it could all be 3D, and we could rotate around it. And it's like, how are you going to design all of that, Alan? That's going to take you ages, you know. So yeah, tough stuff. But you know, it is what it is, and it is the things that it is. Okay, so we're coming up to the end of the hour. We've done what we always do. We've sat here and just wittered, right? You know.
I know.
that you guys would like to sort of mention in relation to Lavecon this year, and in relation to Elite Dangerous and our lovely community. Is there any things that you wanted to kind of highlight?
Not really. I'll just let you know, Chris, I've just signed up for one of your board games tonight.
Yay!
So you'll have at least 3 of us.
Excellent. That'll be good.
John will be the horns. There you go.
Yeah, I think it's. We kind of do these love-ins about the Elite Dangerous community. It still is the best game community I've ever been involved with, and I think, and it's amazing just how, talking from the point of view of someone who doesn't play the game all that often, it's always amazing to me how much fun it is to still be involved in the Elite community, even when you don't actually play, the game itself. I thoroughly enjoyed the Spider-Mine stream, earlier, and it's kind of inspired me to dig out, the EDRPG again and get playing with people, because it's a world that I love. And I think, bizarrely, I actually completely forgot to back the Kickstarter, but having played it, at Lavecon last year and hearing them talk about it again, I'm like, I really should pick up battle cards, because the ability to play with those ships but not have to do it in real time is probably up my street. So yeah, it's just, I think that's the thing. That's what I love about the Elite community, is it's about so much more than necessarily what you're doing in the digital game. That's and I think that hasn't changed this year. I think it's a massive shame we can't all meet up properly, but people are still there and people are still chatting, and we're doing other things, and it's amazing.
I love the little innovations, and not the ones that necessarily that are coming from the games company. It's more about the things that people have just thought about and come up with, because and the three of us are all like-minded in this. In that John will write some little computer game that just thrashes around and does kind of multiplayer stuff, and you sit there going, this is really good fun. When he did Wire Wars, it was really good fun, and he just sort of has this mind that kind of turns to that, and then you'll put something together that kind of you just go, oh wow, that's really really cool, in terms of what's there, and I kind of try, and I kind of make this or make that, and I just love the fact that it's the same. It's not just us. There's a whole bunch of people that that are like this in terms of what's there. Just seeing some of the paintings, seeing some of the board game stuff that people have put together in the past, some of the RPG stuff, some of the just coming up with something and just going, oh well, I thought I'd try a little bit of this, and well, we had this idea, with voice attack, with the ED tracker, with all of these different things over the years that have come out of this. It's just lovely to have this kind of, quite courteous and polite community that supports people who have ideas and just kind of go, oh yeah, I'll give it a go. Oh, that's really cool. Why don't you do this, 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 or this? And I think that's the strength of what's there. That's the stuff I love, and that's mostly what I love about Lavecon every year, in terms of just coming in and absorbing all of that. There you go, is my loving.
Yeah. Well, I think you both said it, so I don't know if there's anything I can really add to that. I mean, yeah, you both monologued it beautifully. What can I say? I do miss the meeting out, because, as you say, I actually have played Elite a couple of months ago. Got back into it. I was, I do it in like fits and starts, where I kind of like jump in and then I'll play it solid every night for a couple of weeks. I think I was worried about, am I going to have enough money for whenever they release an expansion that I actually do really really want to play? Will I have the cash I need to do whatever I want? So every so often I go in and grind. As I said, carriers didn't really grab me, so I haven't been back on for that. But I will eventually be back, especially with this Odyssey stuff. But just to go back to the Lavecon stuff, I do miss touching base with, well, you guys in particular, but everybody else as well.
Okay, so I think that kind of concludes our hour. Thanks, chaps. So thank you to John, and thank you to Chris. I'm going to sign us off here, because Grant, I know, is well aware that our schedule starts to get a little packed. So thank you to everyone who chose to join us and listen to us ramble about a bunch of disparate things. If you can't fly safe today, then try to fly socially distantly, responsibly, and also fly dangerous. Take care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you.
Out.